this. Go ahead and call this council retreat to order. I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over and we'll get started.
All right, good morning. I've worked with all of you before, so you know my name is Dave Mercier, but if folks are tuning in, they wouldn't have any familiarity with me. There, how's that? Let me get close to it then. Let me start again. Good morning. My name is Dave Mercier. I'm a retired city manager, and I've had the pleasure of working with various City of Sequim councils for about 10 years now. And I'm pleased to be here this morning to work with you on a retreat that deals with a SWOT analysis and two other issues. I'm getting signals to get closer to the mic. Here we go. So first on your agenda are two items that the council arrived at a consensus at your last meeting to start off your retreat. Item number one is the recently completed citizen survey.
Push that up if you want to walk around and not be
All right. Okay, thank you. Just a quick observation before we open the commentary. I think there are two wonderful qualities of that survey that will make the feedback you receive from your community actionable. One is recency. It is such a fresh product that none of the data has had an opportunity to go stale. Secondly is reliability. You had an amazing number of respondents, well above what would be required for statistical validity. And so with those two powerful ingredients involved, I think you're well posed to make grand use of that particular community feedback piece. So with that, I'll turn to council. You wanted an opportunity to provide commentary or ask questions. This then is that opportunity.
Are we talking just about the survey now?
Yes.
Okay. I really appreciated being able to read the comments that we got to and to see some of the threads there that are things that we have been talking about and working on. I did see stoplights as an issue, but also, you know, that housing is a concern, although there's differing opinions on how to address that. And I think that's really important as we move forward with the comprehensive plan this summer. But also that our citizens appreciate the park spaces, and they're really, many of them excited about what we're going to be doing with Centennial Park and updating the park equipment. So I just think it was really good to get the actual comments too, because that's always helpful.
When I read the survey, there are some questions about future housing or future development, and the way people answered it, I'm going to base my comments on what I've read on social media. People have concerns that we don't have enough water and that nobody is controlling growth. And whenever somebody says that to me, I refer them to the city's website, because every development has to go through a series of 10 to 14 tests that the developer pays for. So I'm not sure where they're getting their information, or if they if they took the question to mean one thing and other people took it to mean something else. Thank you.
I'll chime in with a little bit of, I do appreciate that everybody had their input on the community survey. So I'm really grateful for everybody that answered all the questions. But there's also a caveat of we can't make everybody happy all the time. And it's, in my opinion, it's important that we focus on the things that we can do now, but also attempt to set things up so things can be more efficient going forward, because it would it'd be so painful to just look at Sequim 30 years from now and think, man, we could have done something about that, but we didn't. Or, just anything like that. But there's, it always comes back around to, we can't make everybody happy all the time. And what we can do is do our best and educate. I've found educate has become one of the key components. And in regards to the community survey specifically, it was really awesome to see that a lot of the concerns that people have, we're actively working on already, which is really nice, to the best of our ability. Like RCWs sometimes get in the way, and that's just something that we have to deal with sometimes. I think that's all I had to say for now.
Other discussion, commentary?
Hello, good morning, everyone. Definitely want to echo some of the comments of my fellow counselors. I think that we're in a balancing act at this time because affordable housing is a big concern, but also folks are saying, wait a second, what about growth? So balancing those two, and then making sure that we are reaching out to the community to help them understand where we are and what's going on, and that their concerns are things that we're already working on and that we're working on them as quickly as possible. So, yeah, that was a big piece, that balancing act between affordable housing and the growth management. That was a big, something that really stuck out to me. And always bubbling around in my mind is, as we're doing all of that good work, let's also think about how does this growth and affordable housing, how can we help the developers and the folks that are working in our city know that we want to make sure that as we are here very close to our natural resources, that we are prioritizing water-wise, drought-tolerant, all of those things in our communications, in our stipulations, requirements. And I know that we already do a lot of that in terms of asking folks to implement new landscaping with drought-tolerant, that sort of thing. So thank you.
Anything further?
It strikes me that it's classic two perspectives, glass half full, glass half empty view of the world. And I'm a half full sort of person. So I'm just really struck with how positive this report was, with clear, as you said, clear things that need attention, some things that are already on the radar, and some things that we can move up in our priorities for this coming term. But the overall impression of those that took the time to respond is that this is a place they enjoy living. They're concerned that it stays a place that they can enjoy living, and that we do our job as council to ensure that. So I'm overall very encouraged as a new member of the council that we're starting from a really good, solid platform, and with clearly defined things to focus on.
Are you ready to move on to the next item?
One quick comment we got from the young ladies on our council is that the teenagers thought that the survey was too long. And I thought that's a very interesting perspective compared to older people. Thank you.
There you go. Good. The second topic that the council was keen to have an opportunity to comment on was the current effort updating the comprehensive plan. So what is it that is on your minds?
I think, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think we wanted to make sure that we were focusing on the comprehensive plan as we do our work today. I mean, same things that we heard from the survey, worried about affordable housing, worried about the impacts of housing developments on water, and making sure that we're still having recreation for people to do too, so they can enjoy living here, not just living here. But housing to address the needs for people who work in healthcare and people who work in the schools. And so I want to make sure that I know that the SWOT was not what we were expecting. I think you know that. And so we're just trying to make sure that we're incorporating the comprehensive plan into our discussion, I think was what we talked about.
That resonates for me. Just that today's discussion, today's activities, use that as our lens, as our what our communities ideas are in terms of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and then use this discussion to inform comp plan. Absolutely, I want to, yeah.
I don't want to rush you. If there's other commentary, I want to make certain you have an opportunity to make it.
Just a quick comment that, in my opinion, when we're working on our board retreat and thinking about strategic planning for the upcoming year or 2, year to 3, whatever it ends up being, I think that the comp plan, it's such a great moment in time for Sequim and for this retreat, I think, because the comp plan is just one facet. It's a big facet of the work that we continue to do. And I think one of the great things about the comp plan too is that it helps put council, the policymakers, and operations team able to understand each other and understand what things need to be worked on. And so I guess just to say that the comp plan can also be a really helpful guiding plan to help us figure out where we want to go to, because I see a lot of problems when a council come together or a board come together and they just focus on what needs to happen right now in this moment. Yeah, there are things that we could work on, yes, but we also need to think about how the things we work on now will impact SQUIM 10, 20, 30, et cetera, years from now.
Thank you. Anything else on this topic? Hearing none, let's move on to the SWOT analysis. So let me ask to begin with, who has participated in a SWOT analysis in the past? So it's a new venture for at least several members of council. So let me take a moment and describe what I think the purpose of a SWOT is. It really is a strategic thinking exercise. So what it does is it looks to identify conditions that exist in your environment now that have some implications for you, whether they might impede or promote your ability to accomplish the objectives that you have in mind. As you think back to what the world was like pre-pandemic, the conditions that people were working with now, then as compared to now, are radically different. And unfortunately, sometimes organizations get stuck with a strategic plan that was adopted 5, 6, 7 years ago, and the conditions have changed so rapidly that it's rendered the plan essentially ineffectual. And so, as Darwin was saying when he talked about how to make a species thrive and to promote evolution, it was not about strength or speed. It was about the ability to adapt to changing conditions, because bringing answers to yesterday's questions that aren't current anymore really doesn't promote advancement at all. So that's why organizations, before they look at comprehensive plans and they set up goals for the next several years and for the coming year, generally take a time out and step back and say, here's a way for us to sort of assay the conditions in our community that affect us, recognizing that all cities live in an ecosystem. I mean, they're just I don't mean to upset anyone, but the recent action by the city of Port Angeles affecting garbage rates, for instance. Things happen elsewhere that have ripple effects that touch your organization in your planning and may, again, get in the way or help expedite your ability to get to your desired ends. And so it's very helpful before people try and say, what are our goals coming forward, is they actually take the time to look at what's going on and then figure out how to either take advantage of some of those conditions or how to reduce the negative impact of others. So that's why organizations generally start a strategic project with this sort of exercise. And so what we'll do is we'll look at what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that exist today that may affect your operation. And we're going to talk about internally and externally. So a number of the questions that I have to help stimulate your thinking as we populate each of the 4 quadrants will say, does the city or the organization something rather? Because really they go hand in glove. So I wanted to clarify that. Sometimes that's a confusing point. Technical support. So let me tell you that your senior management staff has gone through this exercise with me a couple of weeks ago, and their work product will be introduced to you later as we go through our process. I find it important that the council has an opportunity to tap into the professional talent that you have on board, but at the same time, it's very important to begin with nobody else's impressions in mind. And that's why I wait till later in the process to introduce the staff's work. But you will have it available to you before we ask you to make any selections. And so we'll populate the 4 quadrants. We'll introduce the work of the staff, so you have that at hand. We'll introduce, once again, what I think you've already seen, which is a mini SWOT analysis of the citizen survey. So again, you have all of that information before you. And then I'm going to ask you all to select your top 3 items in each quadrant. That's how we're going to reduce a vast amount of individual observations and impressions to what might be a corporate consensus. And that's what helps set the direction for the organization. So that's generally how it proceeds. So with that, let's begin talking about strengths. What do you think the organization and the city do well?
Can you define organization? Is that the council? Is that
No,
the
the city
staff?
the city family,
okay.
the city organization, if you will. So your organization as well as your community. What do either or both of them do well? Kathy?
I think that we're very fortunate to have the technology that we have compared to other cities. It really makes it easier, and I appreciate it.
Kind of a tangential idea to that is the our level of customer service for the citizens. I think that really stood out from the survey to me, is that people felt satisfied.
This might be one of them. In my experience, I feel like as a council person, I have been able to work really well with all of the staff people. If I've ever had any questions, they're very open-minded and receptive to answering any questions I might have. And so I'm not quite sure how to put that in a concise, yes,
I think you just did.
exactly that. Yes. See what I mean? Very helpful. And so I think that makes it a lot easier for me to be able to come with questions. You know, like there is no stupid question. Anybody is willing to answer everything.
Yes, Vicki.
And along those lines, also that staff are very knowledgeable in the work that they do.
Overall performance of the city. There doesn't seem to be as many issues with Sequim as you might see, as say Port Townsend and Port Angeles when it comes to certain areas. You know, Port Townsend a while ago had issues with audits and things like that. So I've never had any issue in any type of area with the city. So
Clean audits.
Perhaps at a little different altitude, we have an incredible, unique physical environment, attractive and so on. And I would include in that the wider community that we're part of, particularly the relationship with the tribe.
Okay.
Is a huge, huge strength, I think.
What does the organization or city accomplish that brings a sense of pride to you? So now we're doing a little bit of, we're looking through the rear view mirror right now, not the windshield. So what do you take particular pride in having, what the city has been able to accomplish?
I've noticed that I come in with like people-oriented things. So I would say that just a couple years ago, the community felt really divided and really, it just felt like a little bit of a chaotic place to live in dealing with people. And I feel like we have done a lot of work to come together and think about all the things that we have in common rather than fighting over everything. And I feel like that is probably my biggest hurrah.
Citizen engagement.
Just real quick, because we had over 50% of our local voters engage in the last election for city council. So that's a really high turnout, voter turnout.
For primary.
Kathy?
I appreciate that. And you said it's looking back.
Yes.
The way that the COVID problem was handled.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was made available to people, extra food, vaccinations, because to expand on what Rachel said, we have a lot of collaboration. We collaborate very well with other agencies so that we all depend on each other. And I thought, I mean, I couldn't do anything about it happening, but I like the way the city responded to it. Thanks.
Thank you. Other points of pride?
I would say that our water reclamation facility are that we're already doing quite a bit in the sustainability realm. So that's a piece of pride for me. I'm always like, let's do more, but we are already doing a lot. So that's awesome.
Yes, Vicki.
And I would say that our reputation and I want to point out to Barb that, you know, the tourism efforts and getting the word out about Sequim, people know it's a great place to come. The Lavender Festival, the Sunshine Festival, the Irrigation Festival, bring people here. But not just during those festivals, but when they hear about them, they want to come at other times of the year too. And some of that is just like Dan said, this is just a beautiful place to be, but without people knowing about that, we couldn't bring them here. I'd say communications then.
What have others outside of the Sequim community complimented the city about? Some of you have been in office for a while. Others still get around the entire region and people have conversations. So in those conversations, what might you be hearing that says, hey, we're doing okay?
A lot of people have told me about since hiring a new city manager, we seem to have really strong leadership, and I would agree with that.
This doesn't really have to do with us, but what I hear about is the Olympic Discovery Trail and how great it is for people when they come to visit and use it either for like marathons or bike things or just to walk on it.
Have other organizations complimented the city?
A lot of compliments I've heard are that they're so easy to work with.
Okay.
Mhm. Mhm. A lot of the things on my mind are already on that list.
Consensus is good. So thinking about the citizen survey, just from memory, now it's not a test, what were the highest compliments paid? Yes.
The parks. I took that. And I was also very surprised that the housing issues was not higher, that there weren't more people as worried about it as we are. That was a big surprise. But people mentioned the parks and then maybe the festivals next.
I was going to say this competence of the city staff, that was pretty high, maybe the highest one. Satisfaction.
Well, I mean, not an editorial comment, but I did watch the presentation on the citizen survey, and I started my career in public service in 1972, and I've never seen such a favorable survey in any community.
Really?
Yes. So something else that you might have drawn from that survey that said, I guess we hit it out of the park?
Just general quality of life.
Mhm. Public safety was definitely a favorable one as well. That's always a good thing to see. 71% of folks were pleased with how quickly police respond to emergencies. And accessibility, it's so good to know, and being prepared for emergencies. I know here in the Sequim area, I'm very, very grateful. We have a lot of folks that think a lot about how to help our city be resilient in terms of a national or a natural disaster, not national, natural disaster. So that gives me hope and peace, and knowing that there are so many folks that are developing good responses for our community. So, and that our police are available to folks. So I'm glad that people feel that way.
Does the organization have any unique resources that you're able to rely upon?
We have our relationship with the local tribes, and we do use them as a resource.
Okay.
And we also have a good relationship with the hospital and the school system.
How do you feel about the financial strength of the community? City budget, secure? Worrisome?
Very, very secure.
They don't give me the checkbook for a reason.
Safety first, yes. All right, so as you sit back and think about all that you've heard that makes you feel good about being a city council member, is there anything else that you would like to add to the list of strengths?
I coming in with the people again. Every employee I've talked to seems very happy with their job. And I think that that's also come to light in the employee surveys. And I don't think I've ever been in a place where every employee seems happy to be here. And I think that's one of our strengths, because when everybody working is happy, it usually ends up meaning a happier place to live.
Are we ready to turn your attention to weaknesses? Now, this isn't a fault-finding exercise. It's just genuine introspection. I've throughout my professional career, I've preached improvement, not perfection. I knew that that's a nice goal to pursue, but it's unlikely to be achieved. And so there are issues with organizations and communities that get in the way of moving forward and accomplishing grand things for your community. And so that's what we're touching base on now. And so the first question would be, what could the organization or the city improve?
And I think we're working on it, but there was a long period of time where the city grew a lot, but the infrastructure didn't grow. So our weakness is still that the infrastructure needs to catch up with that growth, but it's something that's being consistently worked on.
Mm-hmm.
I think our attention to residential development is appropriate, but perhaps less attention to economic development. That we're pleased that we've got a strong tax base from our property taxes, but we have not done a lot to develop
Receiving less attention.
economic.
Economic development. Thank you.
For me, it's, we have all the strengths that we listed, but we still, as a city, still play second chair too much and let other organizations lead when we have the ability to. So we rely too much on the county to take things over. We, things such as that, where we have the expertise that we should be able to
Mm-hmm.
lead that effort or whatnot.
Okay.
And I know it's being worked on as fast as it possibly can, and that our council has established a state of emergency about this, but and I believe it ties into the economic development piece too. We are an expensive place to live. So how to, I'm wondering how we can help organizations like Habitat and other developers move the needle further along with offering more places for folks to live at various price points.
Anything else you think should receive some attention?
Oh, you go ahead. I got it.
Well, and again, reading the comments in the survey, I think some of the negative comments weren't actually due to poor actions on the city. It was more lack of education about things. And they know that we do, when there's an issue, the staff will put together an FAQ or a fact sheet and put it out there. But I think more proactive education, especially about housing and homelessness and what the police can do about homelessness, and I think it'd be good to have better, but then we have to get people to read it too. So.
Right. And that's what lent to the development of the fact sheets that you're referring to, yes. Good.
I think while it did serve its purpose definitely during COVID, but we still relied too much on big box stores to keep money coming in.
If I'm ever typing something that is not reflective of your comment, please let me know.
Is the city doing anything that it should avoid doing? It's that old balance point. Sometimes it's not what you're not doing that gets in the way. It's something that you're doing that if you stopped would remove a barrier to some desired outcome.
Maybe more town halls. Not that we should be, I'm not really, I'm not being, I don't know if I'm going to be able to frame it in response to your question very neatly, but just to, that there's an opportunity then perhaps to have more folks in person, face to face, discussing or learning about what the city is doing to help with bridge that gap.
I agree with that, and it goes back. I think it also adds on to number 5, Vicky's comment about more community education.
Mhm.
Yeah, just that public comment at city council is a good place for folks to come and make comments, but I think it just needs to be more organized. Like, let's have a topic. And that one night we're going to have a presentation about this is what the city's doing. This is what the city can and can't do. Invite everybody, advertise it well. And then allow for kind of maybe, I don't know, discussion, just more people getting together and learning together.
Yeah, definitely something under opportunity would be to add, reunite, was it SWIM 101? That was kind of like that.
Note that. I'm just going to note that 101 property. That's good. Have other organizations, groups in your ecosystem pointed out weaknesses that they perceive in either the city organization or the city itself?
A lot that I hear of revolves around building issues, how long it takes to get permits and things like that. So I wouldn't say, since obviously I don't deal in that arena. All I hear is the negativity surrounding it, but speaking with staff, understanding the process obviously alleviates a lot of those comments and stuff. There still is room to grow in different areas.
Got it. Kathy?
We've actually streamlined our permitting process, and the developers were very responsive to it. They had a meeting, got their input, and streamlined it. So it was a positive.
All right, we'll add it to the strengths list.
Thank you.
Just on that topic, code scrub is definitely a strength too, getting our code. Yeah.
So, any other weaknesses that come to mind that might require some attention?
I think it plays into my comment on number 3, and it's only a weakness because unfortunately it's where we choose to live, but our location. It's too, being far from say I-5, it hurts us with, jobs, things like that. So it's just basically kind of our location, unfortunately, to a certain extent.
Okay. Are there residual effects from past happenings that are getting in the way of accomplishing good things in your community?
Still the coming out of COVID and the issues prior to
COVID emergence.
Yeah, there's still residual effects with the Mac Clinic, with the previous city manager, things, those topics. They're getting better as we move away from them,
Mm-hmm.
but there still is a little bit of residual
Mm-hmm.
issues from those.
And other past events. Yeah. Can you think of anything else that might be hampering forward movement?
Well, going back to the comprehensive plan, I think, the current plan is really focused on growth of single family homes and really, so the weaknesses is not supporting like workforce housing and affordable housing in our comp plan.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate the thoughtfulness here, and I don't want to rush you along at either. I want to make sure that you have ample time to look at what's on the list and say, are there gaps? Maybe we should identify something else.
Just something I might add there. We need to fix our boundaries, city boundaries there. That's just me personally. Our city boundaries.
Need fixing.
We just need to have, whatever we need to do to fix it. But have you seen our city zoning map? Yeah, that's just me personally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Dave, I'm assuming there's opportunity in this process eventually to circle back to seek clarification.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'd really like to drill down on what Brandon's asking, but now isn't probably the time.
Well, no, actually, it is quite timely.
So I'd just be curious what a fix would look like. Just make it square.
I spoke. Who was it?
Perhaps I can interject. I think as we go through a SWOT analysis, we're not focused on what the fix is at this particular time, but we are focused on what's a better description of the problem.
Right. Okay.
And so if you have a community boundary that's got holes in it where there are unincorporated territories surrounded by organized territory and other sorts of aberrations, are those what you're referring to?
There's too many islands in the city and stuff like that. I think that could be better. Obviously the annex discussion's a whole different topic and things like that. But
Okay. Thank you. And that's what I was hoping for.
I thought so. Yeah. Good. So this is when I generally tease and say, is the confessional over, or is there more that needs to appear on your list?
Do we look burdened?
Can you absolve us?
Well, it's uncomfortable very often. I mean, most people run for office because they have great intentions for community betterment, but we do bump into reality. And if we face it and sort of take stock of it, then it gives you an opportunity to address it. So that's one of the reasons why it is one of the focal points in the SWOT.
I think one of our barriers, it feels like, yes, we could solve so many things if only there weren't an RCW in the way.
Certain RCWs. Harmony, do you have something?
Yes. As a city councilor, I think one of the things we can do is put our hopes and intentions out into the public sphere. And one of my hopes and intentions is for there to be more opportunity or more indoor activities for parents with children and teens. We need more teen and young family indoor opportunities. So I hope that anyone out there who's wanting to take that on as a business opportunity, that they show up and put that out there. Just discovered the First Street Play Cafe in Port Angeles this past weekend, and I was blown away by how imaginative and wonderful it was.
Mhm. There you go.
I think a weakness is not directly tied to the city, but it does affect the city, is the inability to pass school bonds.
Okay. Is there an area of city operation that is seriously under-resourced?
I'd say the city shop, but we're working on it. The city shop.
I wonder about code compliance, if that's an area, given the results of the survey, that we could resource and move from being a reactive or responsive to being more proactive.
Yeah, for anyone who's viewing, by the way, from time to time, I lean over and chat with Maren as we're trying to correctly paraphrase what it is that we're hearing. It's not a secondary conversation. Harmony?
Great.
Anything else you'd like to go on the list?
I don't know if this is a capital improvement projects. I think we could go after more federal funds for those, especially sidewalks.
There you go, pedestrian safety.
Don't get me wrong, the city addresses pedestrian safety. We have mid-block crosswalks. We have bulb outs. We have flags that you can pick up and walk across the street with. Our signals work, but sidewalks in the residential neighborhoods, especially for people that have mobility issues.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kind of the piggyback off of that, Kathy, our city, and also to draw into what you were referring to, Brandon. I think a lot of the time our city neighborhoods are isolated and they're not walkable towards the core of the city. So that, I think, is a big challenge for us as we move forward, and we are working on them, but that's definitely needs to be a focus to connect all of those suburban neighborhoods to the core of the city with active transportation options.
Kathy.
And a positive would be that for the year 2024, all the buses and shuttles are fare free. And the ridership in Sequim has gone up like 49%. Not the bus to Hurricane Ridge and not the straight shot to the airport, but everything else is fare free.
Mhm. Remarkable. So does that sum up the list of weaknesses? Oh, wait a minute.
Just that I'd like to have that word active transportation included in number 20. It's good. Connectivity with public transportation, very good. But active transportation, I'm sorry, I'm using a term that defines infrastructure to support bicycling and walking and all other modes of transportation other than a vehicle. Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm just want that buzzword on there, I guess.
Right. Yeah. In other jurisdictions, they refer to that as vehicle optional transportation modes. Yeah.
Still going back to, things like RCWs and federal laws, still need an emergency room.
Oh, for medical services.
We don't We don't meet the criteria for a standalone emergency room by
Mhm,
Medicare criteria. And if
mhm.
you can't bill Medicare, then you'll be bankrupt in a year. But right now, we don't meet criteria for an
But
emergency
I
room.
leave it on the list.
No, due to being in between two other emergency rooms. You have to get Medicare certificate of need.
I don't think that keeps us from working with the hospitals. I mean, we have urgent care. I think there's an opportunity to work with the hospital on maybe some other kind of urgent options. But I think we have excellent EMS, and I would, I don't know what the data is on how many people don't make it from Sequim to Port Angeles in the ambulance, but I don't think it's a very high number, just from what I know. So I also wondering what putting that resources into Sequim might take away from Port Angeles. From, if you divide up services, then you have to have two of everything. Anyway, sorry.
Good. It seems like we're coming to closure on this particular quadrant. If so, the hour is 10. Would you like to take a break now or push on to the next? I'm hearing a yes. So why don't we reconvene at 10:15? Thank you.
When developers are applying, or that it's in our guidelines. Is it really? I hope it is. Well, I feel like I've read it. There's so much out there. I feel like I have read a document that stated that we are encouraged that.
Welcome back. We're certainly all awake with that announcement that comes on. All right, so now it's time to move on to the next dimension of the SWOT analysis, and that is an assessment of opportunities that are before you all. And so the first and widely open question is, what good opportunities are open to the organization and the city at this moment in time? Thanks. You got that 101.
I think it was the Sequim 101 classes. That's okay. No, it's all right.
Oh, I get it.
Yes. Yeah. Let's leave that in the opportunity section. It was something we were just meant. Thank you for bringing it up, Brandon, that it's something that we should be focusing on here.
I would put under there, hyphen, continued education. Only because, I mean, it's always going to be an issue that somebody thinks, particularly when it comes to open government. So the more that we can explain processes, RCWs and things like that, the less headache it's going to be for, DCD, public records, council, stuff like that.
Well, within that, do you think there's an opportunity? I think the one thing I saw in the comments on the survey was maybe confusion about what the city can do for people who appear to be homeless and what we can't do legally. And would that be part of a 101 class, or would that be something totally separate?
It could.
And
Options, yeah, for the city.
Well, it's more understanding of what legal actions can or cannot be taken, this, yeah.
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. to address homelessness. I hate that word.
In the context of the previous category, Harmony raised the more indoor opportunities for family, entertainment opportunities for families and teens. I don't know if that got caught as a threat. It wasn't phrased as a threat. It was phrased as an
Right,
opportunity.
right.
So
Oh, yeah,
Indoor.
yeah, sorry, weakness.
So the corollary is what you're expressing
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
And I think she referred to indoor.
An opportunity would be to utilize our strengths and take lead roles. And continuing on, I would think with the code scrub at the very end, opportunity would be to just do a revised code.
All right, since you've jumped ahead about 2 questions for me. Thank you, Mayor. So I would actually like Maren to display the strengths list again. And so I will follow up your comment by asking which particular strengths do you think can be converted to an opportunity for positive action? Positive action.
Number 4.
Well, this is an eye chart now.
Yeah, I can scroll through this slowly. Let me know how many times you'd like to review the list, but I will scroll slowly.
All right, so number 4. So we're gonna just note those down for now.
I'm sorry. Dave, can you reframe the question again?
All right. The mayor's observation was that some of the strengths that have been identified really lend themselves to seizing an opportunity. And so now the question is, can we identify more specifically which of those strengths are most likely to provide the opportunity that's being suggested?
Number 12.
See, collaborative partnerships, for instance.
$20.
24 seems very logical to me. And then if you could go back up to the top. Eight, like a conglomeration of 8 and 9, as it were.
All right. So
And I need to put 13 on the list too. That's going to dovetail with something else I need to bring up.
okay, good. So now what we need to do is cut and paste those numbered items into the subset of capitalizing on your strengths. And so I've got those numbers for you if you want. Those are 4, 8, 9, 12, 13, 20, and 24.
Would anybody like to see the full list again?
We're going to cut and paste those items and put it under that have been mentioned and put them on the opportunities list so that we can maintain our thought process. These are all under cap. She has the more difficult task. You're on stage, everybody's watching.
No pressure, Mary.
No, no. 24.
Because Dan just got that one. And Dan just got one too, so.
All right, so we've captured the strengths that could lend themselves to be converted to an opportunity or relied upon in capturing an opportunity. Are there other opportunities then that come to mind for you?
I have a couple. I think that it would be good to go through exploring what it would look like to divert more of the water reclamation facilities resource, as it were, that the reclaimed water. Thank you. Thank you. The reclaimed water. What does that look like to divert it, stockpile it? I mean, well, stockpiling it would be such an engineering feat, but I've heard several times that we use 100% of it during the summertime. So what would that look like? And then a second piece there would be, and this would probably be a different bullet point, not there, but in our code, in our Sequim Municipal Code, in Chapter 18, 24-130, and Chapter 17, 28-040, mentions of incorporating drought-tolerant low-water plant materials are referenced and encouraged. And I think that we could do more. I would like to see us offer or explore offering rebates or credits to developers or citizens for choosing native plants, for installing EPA certified equipment in their homes. And Port Angeles has a rain garden program, but I don't think that makes sense in our rain shadow space. But we could definitely let's encourage and then offer and make good on that encouragement and offer ways for the public to go down that path in a tangible way.
Incentives.
And yes, incentives, but with a one-time, like, okay, I bought this thing here, we're going to pay you for half of it or something, or I don't know, let's explore it. What does that look like? But also in an financially responsible way as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Are there current trends that the city could take advantage of?
I would say AI, but I know that the city is working towards that.
I'd put it anyway, AI. Are there other trends, commercially, societally, economic development?
So I was trying to formulate the thought, picks up a little bit, I think, on what perhaps Vicky said there. It feels like there may be a fair amount of untapped federal resource now with the Infrastructure Act and others, that just wondering if I'm super impressed with how much we do with finding grants and applying and successfully. And I don't know if the staff feels like there's more that they just don't have capacity to go after, or we're not being creative enough, or what. So
Thank you.
I think an opportunity might be to get more involved at the federal level. Because I think using lessons that we learned for like SIMDARs, where I don't think if we didn't have an actual lobbyist, we still wouldn't have that money. So I think not necessarily having a lobbyist at the federal level, but being more knowledgeable and having more connections at the federal level is definitely, because some things will take, appropriations and not just grants.
Are there other untapped resources or insufficiently tapped resources to take advantage of?
I think one more, and there's always an opportunity to continue building, but continue more partnership with the tribes and everything, because they have access to different resources that help our community as well. So continuing to improve those collaborations with the tribes and everything.
Thank you.
Affordable housing isn't on that list yet. Just affordable housing.
But I would say our opportunity is to address that in updating the comprehensive plan, right? Yes. We've got the comprehensive plan update coming up.
Did you want that as a sub affordable housing? Sorry, we're talking off mic. Affordable housing / workforce housing, and
then
incorporating it
dash
into
comprehensive plan.
the comp plan.
Yeah.
at a different altitude again, part of our longer range transition from a perhaps heavy manufacturing and agricultural economic base to tech and more tourism economic base feels like an opportunity to explore and tap into in terms of economic development.
I would go back to add box store in there too, since it's under a weakness.
So how would box stores be referred to in this category?
Well, if we're transitioning, I think, like I said, big box served its purpose, particularly like during COVID when they were allowed to stay open. That kept us pretty solvent. But if something were to happen to them, they still maintain quite a chunk of income for the city. So I think diversify more than just solely rely on that.
Diversified. Thank you.
And maybe this fall, well, I don't know if it falls under the federal funding, but broadband, there's still, I work from home, and even right here in the middle of the city, didn't you get kicked off the internet, Maren? So I think we still have broadband issues, and I think that could help with some of our smaller businesses, especially I think through like any other pandemics, having the ability to be more online saved a lot of restaurants.
Thank you. When you think 5 and 10 years down the line, is there something you could set in motion now that might enhance the well-being of the community over a longer distance of time?
I would say housing, because what's happening to us now should have been started 10 years ago, but nobody sat down and thought about everybody retiring at the same time with disposable income and or wanting to move to such a beautiful city for their retirement. And another issue is, how do you get contractors to build houses when they could build a $700,000 house and sell it immediately. How do we entice them to build workforce housing?
So beyond the expansion of housing options, again, as you look 5, 10 years down the road, is there something in particular that you would like to be able to talk about then with pride?
I know that the Arts Commission is working on the Creative District designation, and I think that is also something that could bring both quality of life to people who are living here and to bring more tourists in.
Kathy?
And council's talked about this before, but we really need some light industry. Because of our location, it's not easy. It would have to be an industry that doesn't need to ship goods. We don't have a train. We don't have river barges. We have a port in Port Angeles, but you have to go to a little highway, 1 lane each way. And we need some type of light industrial that would employ people in Sequim.
Industrial employers. Thank you. Anything else on your wish list for the year 2034?
I won't be here.
Been mentioned previously in another context, but the catching up with infrastructure. So if we are continuing to grow at the rate we're growing, then our streets are not currently sufficient for traffic, distribution of sewer lines and so on.
So you have some catching up to do and some building for the future to do.
Anticipate, yeah.
If possible, I'd like to see Sequim become more bike oriented, or what did you call it earlier? Vehicle optional?
That's
Is that what it was? Okay.
Vehicle optional.
I would see the CTE facility or like-minded building.
Yes. And I know Harmony touched on the water, but I think we do have to be really mindful about what gets built and where the water is going to come from.
I think we're already addressing that. Another well is being dug, but maybe we could encourage people to be mindful when they use water. I mean, now that would affect us in 10 years.
Support water conservation. Yep. Anything else come to mind when you picture the ideal Sequim?
Maybe still back up under opportunity more still, but continued engagement at the state and federal level. Because a lot of things that would help Sequim have those RCW barriers to them.
Not to put you on the spot, but I would love to. Maybe this is just a general question for the room, but do you have an example in mind? I know you and Rachel have brought it up a couple times this morning.
The growth management act, the mobile home park issue, rent control things like that affect local, but we have no control because they're state issues. So continue work at the state level to get those changes made so we can.
Yes, I'm familiar. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Or things like the multifamily tax credits and stuff like that for just different things that are set by RCW that prohibit us, whether it's Sequim size or if it's just general location type things.
Are you aware of any resources the city has that's either untapped or insufficiently tapped and might provide an opportunity to accomplish something else on your agenda?
Federal funds. I think we could have a lot more ability. But yeah, I think it's on there too. But yeah,
Right, that one
definitely
is,
untapped.
yeah. I just, sometimes there are natural resources that really haven't been fully developed for either tourism purposes or livability purposes or things of that nature. Yeah.
Well, not really a natural resource, but a human resource in Sequim, because we're a retirement community and we attract people from all over. There, I think there is an opportunity to look at when we have issues with staffing, like we've been through quite a bit of trying to get back up to fully staffed from more than COVID, that there are resources within the community that maybe don't want to work full time. So how do we look at, people who are here who have years of experience and knowledge, but yeah, thank you.
I think an opportunity is whatever we can do from a legal standpoint to help work with the schools for new facilities there.
Okay.
Whatever we can do legally.
Right, yeah. Lawful methods.
So maybe more opportunities to be more community partners with other
Yeah, I mean, because obviously we
Just-
can't,
fund them, but we can.
yeah,
Yeah.
whatever. So that we're not violating, RCW's
Mhm.
base.
That's why we
Mhm.
mentioned lawful methods. Yes.
Yeah. But I was thinking the senior center, the Boys and Girls Club, the Y, the library are all great resources for our community members.
Mhm.
We do fund them some, but what are the other things that we can do to help support them? Or how can they support us too?
All righty, yeah. There's a mutuality of that exchange, yes.
In the tourism recreation sector, this is drilling down to very specific, but the marina, John Wayne Marina, currently managed by Port Angeles, is seriously oversubscribed. I mean, the waiting list to get into there is years long. It's probably hyperbole. My guess is you could double the space available in that marina and it'd be filled in a week.
Expansion of capacity options. Well, have we tapped into the recesses of all your brains on the opportunities, or does something else float to the surface? All right, why don't we move on to the worry factors, the threats quadrant. So what do you perceive that might be afoot that could harm the city or the organization?
Climate change, aging population, the baby boomers, of which I am one.
Proud to be a member.
Possibly infrastructure, location.
Infrastructure, what?
Location.
Not sure. I'm not getting you.
What was that?
I'm not connecting.
Oh, save like a Cascadia event.
I was just going to
Oh,
say
okay.
Cascadia.
Okay.
I see. Is there something others are doing that poses a threat to the organization or the city?
I have one brief comment. I was not happy that our state legislators did not follow through on rent capping or not selling out mobile home, not allowing mobile home property to be sold. Even, and last year on the legislative session, they voted down the 6-month notice for rent increase, which did not make any sense to me at all. So are they being lobbied by landowners or,
Mhm.
and it does affect Sequim very much.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Understood. Thank you.
I'd say a threat, I think in my mind, this would be on here, is when we have great candidates for the workforce, like in the schools or medical facilities, but there's no place to live. And so then they can't work here.
Lack of housing impairs recruitment.
Schools too. Some people look at schools and say, "Hey, schools are buildings are outdated, so we're going to find somewhere with a better school." So the facility-wise, not necessarily obviously the quality,
Right.
but
Deterioration of school infrastructure.
And I think we heard in the survey comments too that people have issues getting access to primary care providers.
Other worries?
Lack of childcare.
Nothing else keeping you awake at night?
I think lack of work that's not really impacted by tourism. So service related jobs like restaurants and grocery stores and the big box stores
Mm-hmm.
where people's hours get cut in the winter or they get laid off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Reduction in worker hours.
Service related.
Mm-hmm.
Vicky, did you mean lack of it or lack of non-service related?
Lack of non-service related.
Would you scroll back to the weaknesses list for a moment, please? Do any of the weaknesses pose a threat to the organization or the community?
potentially not enough economic diversity.
When you think about the next generations being able to enjoy the quality of life that you enjoy currently in Sequim, are there things that you think might get in the way of being able to pass that on?
I would say based on the survey, unchecked growth. And things like continued lack of childcare and things like that.
All of my concerns are national issues that I'm passing on to my kids. There's nothing we can do about it.
Good.
I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but I think climate change says it all. That as the warm season gets longer and drier, just really managing water.
Are there any of the threats that are listed that the city is in a position to manage?
What, 11? There's indirect ones like 5,
Yeah.
where we can set,
Right.
code, but we don't
Yeah.
actually build it.
Yeah. Well, when it comes time for you to do a little quiet work on your own today on these items, it is important to think about what is within the span of control of the community to do something about in managing threats, and what might possibly be some way that you can positively impact a negative trend that's coming your way. I'm sorry, Dan, did you have something?
Well, then number 3, I guess, the effort that's being put into disaster preparedness would be a balance to listing it as a threat. I mean, certainly there's nothing we can do about tectonic plates that decide to move tomorrow morning, but how ready are we for that?
All right.
Is that under opportunities, this continued disaster preparedness?
I wonder.
Go back.
Jimmy?
Is that specific enough for you, Mayor?
I mean, that's fine with me. I mean, it's always an opportunity to continue improvement, but
So back on opportunities, it's continuing strength and emergency response capacity.
Oh, I think I just thought of another one. A threat, in my opinion, is when there's one grant, but the entire peninsula is going for it. Like, that's not helpful.
So it's heavy competition for available grant funds.
And part of the aging workforce for the city is people retiring who have a lot of institutional knowledge and making sure that's passed on.
Correct.
Something that I think about is in this, our world is a very digital place now. And it's, and that's great because it helps people with accessibility and working efficiently and all of that. But what if, what if the digital space, doesn't, isn't available at some point? How do we, not that, and that's a huge rabbit hole, right? Like, I'm sure there's printed backup copies of things, but like,
Well, cybersecurity.
Going through, I guess, routine, maybe once a year, like, here's how we do this without a computer. Here's how we do this without the, whatever.
Revisit the analog world.
Yes, revisit analog world for just operational resiliency.
Mhm. Interesting observation.
Been mentioned several times the need to maintain and resource our information flow and education and so on, and finding bandwidth for that channel of communication in such a divisive society, culture, environment right now that that bridges those divides at a very local level.
I think it's the divisiveness and the lack of, I think the divisiveness is primary, and then the lack of the bandwidth for accepting the information.
Yeah, I mean, the environmental issue is that we live in a very divided culture. and very siloized communication streams. So then how does the city of Sequim find a channel that reaches everybody regardless of what they're listening to at the state level or the national level?
And that came up during COVID. Our public library and the parking lot by the J.C. Penney's where they used to be, they offered free Wi-Fi for people to come do their emails, do their homework. It's unfortunate as a parent that you would have to do that, spend time, you know, with your kids doing their homework in the back of the car. But people made the most of it at the time. But I think broadband, personally, I think it needs to be declared a utility, and the federal government needs to step in and tell people that has to be offered like they did electricity. Electricity was not offered to small towns until the federal government stepped in and told them they had to.
The internet. Does that sum up the threat environment?
Yeah, Marin, if I could suggest rephrasing in 14, I'm not wanting to focus so much on our community devices. I think we have a relatively healthy community here, but it's our cultural divisiveness or our society that, you know, the closer we get to Sequim, I think the less divided it is. But then how do you take advantage of that to leverage that unity, relative unity, with the communication, the stuff that Barbara does, and so on.
Any closing thoughts on this particular theme? Hearing none, then I suggest we've come to the end of this portion of the SWOT analysis work. I'm going to propose another break, but before so, I want to tell you what comes next. When you come back from break, we'll distribute to you the results of the senior management's team exercise so that you're aware of the breadth of their thinking there. And we'll also share with you the response that the staff made to reducing the citizen survey to a mini SWOT analysis language. So the 4 quadrants have been identified there. And we want you to take ample time to consider that range of material there is. And then those items which you think you would like to add to your list, then we'd like to incorporate on what you've done so far this morning. After that, I will be asking each of you to select your top 3 items in each category. And after you're done that, I'm going to ask you to share your selections with your colleagues and explain your rationale for why you perceive those as the top items in each of those quadrants. So we want to have, again, an opportunity for you to have ample time to look over the work of your professional staff, decide whether or not you want to incorporate some of that on your choice list in the forefront, and then you go through your own personal selection process of the top 3 in each, and then there's an opportunity to provide feedback and sharing with your colleagues. All righty. With that, I propose we come back at 11:15. Thank you. Welcome back. So what I would encourage you to do is to take some time now and begin by individually looking at the one-page sheet here, which is the SWOT analysis associated with the citizen survey. And what I'd like you to do is just circle the items that you personally would like to see added to the council's list. And then when you're done that, we'll turn to the second document that you have there, which is the senior staff's work on the SWOT analysis to determine if there's anything that they thought of that you want to incorporate on your list before you make some selections. And then what happens is after you're done going through these lists, we'll ask you to identify which numbers you personally found of interest. And if 3 or more counselors agree on them, then we would add them to the council list. Okay, excuse me, we have something over here.
Just a point of clarification.
Yes.
Because the community survey has something below, beyond this SWOT,
Right.
I just wanted to put some clarification.
Surely.
To that, because, so it's the community survey one page. Across, and then you'll see 5 items below that. That's due to the way that we structured the survey. We asked how do the residents rank our services, but then we also asked, and so we got high or low or whatever our stars, but we also said, how important is this to you? So some are just, some of it's just ranking, but if we scored high and it's important, then you don't have to put a lot of work with that. If we scored low and it's super important to them, then it popped out on a different list called priorities. Is that how you would describe this, Barb? The 5 but below? Because as you're picking from this sheet, I want you to know how we put this together.
Well, the priorities could actually be something that we're doing well on or not, but it's what the community feels is important for us to focus on.
Thank you for
Those
that
are the ones that rose
clarification.
to the top.
All right. So with that, I'd ask that you turn your attention to the single-page document, the community survey results, and determine for yourself what you would like to see appear on the council's list.
For clarification, are we just doing strengths or do you want us to do each quadrant?
All of them, yeah. And then we'll work the sheet collectively.
Anybody would like a pen, please let me know.
When they're done with that list, we will call up the council's list. Okay. And then we'll go through each one here and say, okay, they all said this, but it's represented on another, or it's not, and then we'll add it to it, okay? Yeah. The fun part is counting how many hits each one of these gets. So when you're through with the single-page document, please let us know. Yes. Or you can peek. You can peek at your neighbors. Okay. So I'm going to ask them to tell us what they pick, and we're just going to do the number of hits. Would you like me to tally? Well, you can do it. Me? It makes no difference. Okay. Something like what we're actually going to do is when you're all done, we'll put the council's list back on and we'll see if there are duplicates or not. Yes. Looks like we have 2 members of council still working.
The goal was to choose 2 from each.
No. It's whichever one's there that you think ought to be incorporated on the council's list.
Thanks.
I'm sorry if that was not clear. It looks like we're all done. So starting with the mayor, if you could simply tell us which numbers that you have selected in each of those categories.
I don't think number 3 was on there for strengths. That's the one I picked. I think the other ones probably were weaknesses 4 and 5, opportunities 5, and I didn't select any for threats because I think they were all on there.
Thank you. Vicky?
I did not copy Brandon, but I had the same answers.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's being on the same wavelength.
I think for the most part, especially the strengths and opportunities, we said those things maybe in a little bit different way.
Mhm.
But
So just to clarify, strengths 3, weaknesses 4 and 5, opportunities 5.
yes.
Anything for
And
threats?
we hit all the threats. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Kathy?
For strengths, I put number 2 and number 4. For weaknesses, I put number 3 and number 5. For opportunities, I put 2, 3, and 4. And for threats, I put number 1.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, do you want the bottom one also?
No, not
Okay.
at this moment. Thank you. Harmony?
So a lot of them have already been mentioned by fellow counselors. I feel that in the weaknesses, number 3 is missing. Number 5 in opportunities is missing. Yeah, I think those have all been mentioned before. I have nothing new to add.
Okay, thank you. Dan?
I am by nature a lumper. I didn't see anything on this list that was not included, to my memory, on our council list. So
Okay. Thank you.
And I actively chose things that weren't on the on the master list, so to
Mhm.
speak, that we have been working on. So strengths 3 and 4, weaknesses number 4, opportunities 2 and 5. But 2 was kind of so I couldn't remember if it was on there or not. And then threats 2 and 3. I think we had water on the threat, but not in support of new development. So it's kind of like the same things, but a little bit.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So now Marin is quickly tallying the responses you just gave us, and then we're going to give her a moment or two to add the consensus items onto your official list, and then we'll move on to the second document and do the very same thing.
So just for clarity's sake, for strengths, we had a consensus of 3 persons for number 3. For weaknesses, we had a consensus of 3 persons for numbers 4 and 5. For opportunities, we had a consensus of 4 persons for number 5 and no consensus for threats.
Thank you. Did you have an observation, City Manager?
I was trying to keep up with you all. So was there number 4 on weakness had 3? Or just 2?
I have number 4 and 5. For 3, I only had a consensus of 2 for weaknesses.
So the city manager was just asking for clarification on the count. I'm speaking so that anybody watching can understand what's happening here. Good, thank you. So if you have not already turned your attention to the senior management output from their strategic planning exercise, then I would encourage you to do that. And then similarly, identify any items that they came to settle on that you would like to see incorporated in your list.
For clarification, the bolded number at the end of the sentence refers to how many votes from senior management team that item received.
Right, because we went through a DELPHI process at the end of their collection of all of the data, and that's a summary, but it need not be yours. It's important to determine what you want on your choice list before you go through your exercise of choosing the top 3.
How about clarify?
Yeah, just a couple of things to make sure we're not missing something that's
Great.
important. To Marin's comment, everything below number 23 that has the 1, does that just indicate that that's an individual's and nobody necessarily agreed with them?
Correct.
Okay, so it's
Yeah, what we did was the very same thing. We registered every count
Right.
on every item that was selected when we went through the process. So you can see the entire breadth of their consideration and how it was summed
Right.
up to the items that appear
So-
at the top of the page.
a 1 would be the original comment plus 1. One
No,
agreement.
it would be one person when they were choosing 3 items in each of the quadrants, one person chose item number 22
As their top priority.
as one of their 3 top
So
priorities.
everything else that doesn't have a number by it didn't rank in the top 3.
Correct.
Okay. Then the other question is just the numbering down the left-hand side. Is that a Microsoft Word thing?
No, I'm so sorry. So after these were in order, and then I put them in order based on how many votes each received, and so it just messed up the formula for the numbering.
Thank you.
But they just changed the array that it appears, not the number assigned to it.
I just had a clarification question on whoever put this forth. Lack of community trust in district administration. Under weaknesses, just trying to figure out what I mean by district administration.
Thank you.
Very
I think it's, so again, the numbering was a little messed up, but it was a item 5 under number 1, school district. So the I, the 2, the 3, the 4, for the Roman numerals under number 1, school district, again, due to formatting.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yours was a formatting question, not a question of what did you mean when you said that?
Yeah, just whatever they mean by who was the district administration.
So with all that clarification questions, then restate the exercise.
All
now.
right. So what we're trying to find out is if there is something that appears on the senior management team's listing that you want to appear on your listing before you go through your own voting selection exercise.
In all 4 quadrants.
In all 4 quadrants. Yes, sir.
Okay, one more question, clarification. Under threats, legitimate source of information.
Thank you. So 3I refers to deepfakes from artificial intelligence. And so I think the intent there was calling out misinformation put out by artificial intelligence and what's available on the internet right now.
Thank you.
There's no question people are properly notified. So it looks like we have 3 council members still working on the list. No? Okay. No. This is whatever is on the staff's list that you would like incorporated on yours before you narrow down to choices. Thank you. Have you finished, Kathy? I don't want to rush you. I just want to check. Have you?
Just reading and reading. I am finished.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right. I think all council members have finished. And so why don't we start the count just as we did the last time? We'll turn to the mayor and ask the mayor to identify which items in each quadrant that he hopes will appear on the council's choice list.
For strengths, number 6, 15, 19, 30, and 32.
Can you hold for just a moment? Thank you.
Weaknesses 8, 12, and that was it for weaknesses. Opportunities 20 and 21. And threats 9.
Thank you, Mayor.
Sorry, Vicki.
I have 2 and 27. Weaknesses 8 and 17. Opportunities 12, 19, and some combination of 5 and 7. And threats, kind of interested in 5 being on the list, and then 9 separate out.
Kathy, are you ready?
For strengths, I put 21. For weaknesses, I put number 2, number I, one major road.
Under emergency management services?
Under 9.
Okay.
Aye.
That is.
Emergency management services, given our location
One major
demographics.
road. What is
Mhm.
this here?
Right.
I'm so
9
sorry.
subset
Oh,
Roman numeral
It's a
2.
formatting issue from the printing. I apologize.
There you go. Thank you.
African animal. And number, well, it's 16I. And for opportunities, I put number 19. And for threats, I put number 2, number 5, number 4. Number 5 and number 4 are kind of the same for me. And number 9.
Thank you.
Definitely great to read through this list and see from an organizational perspective. That's so I went through, I have a lot. I'm sorry. I circled all the ones that I thought seemed like they were missing from what we discussed. So get ready, Marin. Sorry.
I'm ready.
4 so we're strengths 4, 1, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19.
We asked you to stop there for just a minute. Give her a chance to catch up.
Okay.
19. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
25,
25.
30, 33, and into the weaknesses category, 12, 8, 1, 5, 6, 19. Into opportunities, 1, 6, 12, 19, 5, 7.
Could we ask you to hold for a moment? Okay.
16, 17, 3, 4, 8, 20, and 21. Sorry, thank you. And threats, last category. 2, 5, 9, 3, and 3I both really stood out to me. 8, 11, and 10.
Thank you.
So there's a whole cluster, again, being a lumper and not a splitter, that I would put in a category of staff morale or staff issues that I really appreciate seeing here that we would not necessarily have the same sort of insight on as the staff. So that's in kind of the 12, 13, 14, 15, that area, rather than get into that detail, just a staff morale, because I'll come back to that on the opportunity side. There's the same sort of cluster of comments, in my opinion. So that'd be the strengths one. On weaknesses, 8. And then 5 and 6 are again our staff morale, quality, quality of the workplace.
Which one?
5 and 6. Opportunities, 7. Um, 3 and 4. And threats, 9.
Thank you.
Whenever
Poised
you're
and ready.
Mary. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. 3, 4, 1. 2, 11, 23. 8, 12, 13, 14. 19, 32. Sorry about that. And on to weaknesses. 4, 12, 3. 7, 8, 17. 10, 2, 5, 6. And I just circled the ones I agree with. I couldn't remember about our list, and I didn't cross-reference. So yeah,
that's fine.
just circling everything I thought was great. Under opportunities, 14, 1, 13, 2. 7, 10, 11. 8, 21. And onto threats, 1, 2, 5. 9, 6, 10.
Thank you.
So based on consensus, these items will be added to the overall council SWOT analysis. For strengths, we have 14, competitive and employee compensation. 15, strong relationships with union. 19, strong community volunteer pool. Under weaknesses, we have 12, lack of funding for big city projects. 8, small cities supporting a much larger population. 5, external recruitment. 6, learning curve. Under opportunities, We have 19 SIMDARS bypass, 7 helping staff reach their full potential, and 21 closer partnership with Peninsula College. For threats, we have 2 underlying simmering political divisions, 5 not staying in our lane, and 9 staff burnout.
Thank you, Maren. So lunch has appeared on the side table. My proposal is that we break till 12:30. I know you have phone calls and emails you need to respond to as well. And then when we come back at 12:30, we'll then have the fully incorporated list for you to consider and then to make your selections before sharing your thought process on them. Thank you. See you at 12:30. There you go. Well, I know. Well, welcome back. And during the post-digestive slump period, we're going to ask you to look at the material that's been placed in front of you and select just 3 items in each category, hard as that might be. And then just signal when you've completed that. Thank you. No, you don't have to rank one. No, it's just a number count now. Thanks for asking.
So we're looking at the ones that we think are the most important.
That's right.
Our top 3.
Harmony Rutta's top 3.
Oh, geez.
And each 4 quadrants to be submitted for the record.
Okay.
There you go. Oh, I welcome those sounds. It's like something really registered. Yes.
It's hard.
Yes. Yeah. It's the hardest part of the exercise. It's not that any item is unimportant. All right, it looks as though all the pens are down. So this is the reporting feature of the exercise. And it's okay to take our time at this because not only do we want to hear which items you've selected, we'd really appreciate you sharing your thought process as to why you selected that item over so many others. So you don't have to compare and contrast, but just if you'd share your rationale, it would be very beneficial for folks. So starting with you, Mr. Mayor, if you could name your top 3 in the strengths category.
So number 1 was, well, actually, a whole lot of these could have been combined. So number 15 is the first one. I think that was pretty self-explanatory when speaking of staff and their knowledge of and their expertise in whatever department they're overseeing. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory for me, at least anyway. Number 20, definitely because it was also conferred in the survey that people were, I think it was like 86% or something like that, happy about the quality of life here in Sequim. And number 24, I think, been shown time and time again that Sequim's financial numbers are, at or above and beyond what is even policy maximum or minimum. So being financially secure definitely is a strength for me.
Thank you. What I'd like to do is move on to Vicki so that we have everyone report on the same quadrant before moving on. It's a little less confusing that way.
I also felt like a lot of these could be condensed, so I picked some categories that I thought were more overarching. The first one was 19, competent city staff. The second one was 20, overall positive quality of life. And again, thinking about different aspects of the city of Sequim. And then 24, very secure financially.
Thank you. Kathy?
Okay. My 3 strengths that I chose were number 18, communities pleased with city parks events.
Sorry, Kathy, could you turn on your microphone?
Okay. The 3 strengths I chose were 18, 21, and 32.
And would you comment on 21 and 32?
Oh, you mean as to why I chose it?
Yes,
Okay. I think we have a very strong police department. I don't hear any complaints about them at all. I think when I interact with them, they're very respectful.
Mm-hmm.
And number 32, this city would not get as much done as it does without volunteers. We have a lot of retired people. Some of them have been in leadership positions, and they like to volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Harmony.
Thank you. This one was tricky, and I did some lumping of my own. I really see number 8 and 9 as one item. Let us see. Oh yes, okay, and then, and that's again because as I'm remembering, we had over 50% of our city residents voting in recent elections. We've collaborative partnerships. Number 12 stands out to me as a really big strength of the city. And then 19, 24, 25. I'm sorry. I know.
Choices are hard.
I know. Those three are all centered around our city operations, as it were. I would say city operations. If I had to pick one, maybe I think I would go for 24, because why are we a financially secure city? We have competent staff that are running an excellent operation. We have and they're very satisfied with where they work. So that all feeds into it. I guess if I had to condense it, I just verbally processed it. It's 24.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Dan, your turn.
Number 2, high level of customer service for residents. I take that as a lump of several that are citizen resident focused, leaning. Number 15, strong city leadership for some of the reasons been mentioned before. And then 19 is another lumping of several of the competent city staff. And it's distinguishing in my mind between our responsibility for hiring the city manager and also affirming that the city manager has done a good job of building and maintaining a competent staff. So.
Appreciate the commentary. Rachel?
Number 4, staff are very knowledgeable, and I think it ends up, yeah, I'm kind of a lumper too, I guess. So city staff is one of our big strengths.
Right.
But them being knowledgeable really impacts, in my mind, it helps with all of operations, which then trickles into the policy making part and like the education part. If I have a question, I know that I can ask any city staff and they will give me a good, thoughtful answer. And if a citizen asks me a question that I don't know the answer to, I know who to ask. Collaborative partnerships. I feel like when we have a stronger partnership pool, I guess you could call it, we can get more done because we are so isolated out here. And then city parks, number 29. I think I chose it because it is one of the facets that makes Sequim so attractive to come to. And it's not just like a local resident thing. It ties into the tourism part too.
Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Mayor, if you'd like to start on weaknesses, your top 3, which sounds a little odd, say your top 3 weaknesses. How about the 3 that you selected as highest concern?
Number 1, obviously, I think, like I said, as we grow, we need to make sure that thing, it could get lumped in with needing, sidewalks, things like that. But aging infrastructure is obviously something that's a major concern for any city. Number 12, again, I think it overarches a lot of other weaknesses that without workforce housing or affordable housing, you lose, that workforce that also leads to weaknesses in other areas. And for me, number 3, I think going back to utilizing our strengths to take lead in community issues, not having to go out for RFPs for everything, utilizing in-house things like that. I understand, staff time, money, financial, but to me personally, far too much. We rely on other entities to take leads on issues. I think that puts us in a position where we end up playing second chair and getting shorted in the outcome on a lot of things.
Okay, thank you. Vicki?
I also chose one, and again, we are working on this, but it's a priority that we need to really focus on and continue. Infrastructure, and 12, lack of workforce housing, affordable housing. I mean, we talk about that at every single meeting. And then I chose 19, capital improvement projects need to seek more federal funds, because I live in the downtown area and have almost my entire life. So I've seen the lack of infrastructure, sidewalks, and safety for pedestrians since the early 70s.
Thank you.
Okay, for the weaknesses that I chose was number 12, lack of workforce housing, affordable housing. It is being planned, but nobody knew to plan it 10 years ago. So to stick up for the city, that's what I say, because nobody's going to open a business if they can't find a place to live. And then I put number 16, inability to pass school bonds. That also plays a big part in your economic development, because people, if they transfer here, especially professional people, they want there to be good public schools. And I think we have good schools, but my children did not go through the school system, so I don't have any firsthand experience with it, but I think we have good schools. And the third one would be number 19, capital improvement projects. Seek more federal funding, because there are some projects we cannot fund, but we can plan for them, seek grants for them, present them to the community, get them behind them, and see if they happen.
Thank you.
Hello. So along with Brandon and Vicki, I'm also interested in number 1, infrastructure that needs to catch up with growth. Number 12 was a really big piece for me. It's a kind of the keystone, I think, of having a resilient community, city, region, is having places for folks to live that they can afford so that they can be here to provide the services that we all need and be housed. Very important. The last one was hard. Honestly, 25, 26, where was my first, I want to lump those two together, because that was definitely something that stood out to me as I went through the process of becoming an elected official. So many people, as I was discussing with them, said, "Oh, I'm so sorry," or well, I don't really feel like this pertains to me because I'm not a Sequim City resident. I live in Sequim, but I'm not a Sequim City resident. And I think that we need to do more to support those folks, to make them feel, to help them feel that they have a voice in what's happening. And how that lumps into 26. Yeah, because I want to have a good organization. I want our city to be awesome, and I want it to have the ability to keep highly professional people in our organization. So recruitment, I'm hearing that. I'm not doing a very good job of picking a third one, am I? I know.
Yeah. I think it's called successive approximation. Yeah.
Yes.
I've actually spoken about 3.
I know. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop.
Thank you
Thank you.
for your attention. Yes. Dan.
This is fun. I'm going to start with number 2, economic development. Feels like so many other things depend on our paying attention to economic development. Number 12, in concurrence with my other council members. And then 24 for me was a lump of several things that had to do with funding and infrastructure, catching up with growth and so on. So
Thank you.
2, economic development.
I chose infrastructure.
Item number 1.
Yes. Yeah, number 1, sorry. We really lack a lot of infrastructure, and it's so bizarre to walk through town and be like, oh, this block has a sidewalk, but the next one doesn't. But also that is tied into what, the infrastructure that we don't see. And it's frustrating when decades ago, people that were running SWIM chose the path of least resistance, and now we're having to reap the consequences of that. And so infrastructure, I feel like, is a place where we can be more proactive in thinking about the future and how it will impact future generations too. So number 1. And then I also chose number 14 because there are politics to me is so frustrating because there are so many things that could be changed for the better if there wasn't like big money behind it. And so things like wishing we could cap rent to help the affordable housing portion. We can't do that because we legally cannot do that, but according to the state. So it's just those barriers really impact communities like SWIM that are small and growing and need a lot of help.
Alrighty.
Number 24 tied into a lot of things like the city shop and the infrastructure stuff, but we can't improve anything if we don't have the funding for it to begin with. So that was a big one for me.
Thank you. Moving on to opportunities, we return to the mayor.
All right, number 6, I think I've harped on this quite a bit, that we have, strength, we just need to utilize them. Number 13, I think as soon as we get that finished, it'll help with better directions of things like housing and growth. That was one of the major issues with the survey. And number 22, I put down here because it goes hand in hand with economic diversity to make sure that we have the workforce in place in order to attract these businesses to come to SWIM. So having that in place can definitely increase those odds.
Thank you.
I also picked number 6 as I felt it had covered a lot of area of, our staff being knowledgeable and our community being engaged. And then number 10, search for additional federal funding. Because again, I think, was it Rachel that said we all apply for the same grants, and it's like not very helpful. And then 13, comprehensive plan updates.
Thank you. Kathy.
Okay, for opportunities, I chose number 14, transitioning from agricultural base to tech and tourism. Okay. Thank you. You're welcome. Number 14, transitioning from agricultural base to tech and tourism based economy, diversifying economic reliance. I think that's part of planning. It's very important. I'm not saying we need to remain agricultural because lavender is a big tourism, and tourism is an industry here. So we need to maintain agriculture plus food, growing food. I have some ideas about that. And number 15, enhance the internet connectivity and broadband, meaning I would like to see it become a utility, like I said before, and that the government step in and demand that it be Little companies hook up the big companies. They will not work with each other. They're very territorial. They don't want to give up their rights.
Mhm.
And number 19, opportunity for light industrial employers in town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I went with number 1. I believe an educated community is a satisfied, engaged community. And then moving to the second page, I lumped 16 and 17 together. And because those both have to do with housing and building for the future and helping folks have a place to be. And then number 20 was my third one, catching up with infrastructure. I think a lot of us are in same broad categories, but different numbers. And there's a lot of overlap in these.
Right. Number 6, just because Maren did such a good job of lumping for me. Number 13, the comprehensive plan update addresses several other issues as well. And then 14, transitioning, recognizing that we are transitioning from an agricultural economic base to a different economic base. And what do we do about that?
Thank you now.
All right. I chose number 6 because they are so lumped together, but also because if we are able to capitalize on them, I think that we can just keep heading in the right direction. And I also chose number 13. I think the last I heard is you're supposed to do a comp plan every 10 years. And it feels like in rural communities, especially, 10 years is an eternity and a lot can change in 10 years. So having an updated comp plan that is fresh and relevant, I think could really be a great opportunity. And then number 20, catching up with infrastructure.
Thank you now. All right, now in terms of threats, Mayor, would you be kind enough to start us out?
There's definitely a lot on this list I could have chose from. Number 4, I think, again, not having that just continues to put us at a disadvantage, whether it's for staff recruitment, either here, schools, hospital, economic wise. Number 11, I think if we continue to grow and we're not keeping pace with things like infrastructure, we're going to continue in the same boat and progressively get worse. So making sure that falls back to making, the comprehensive plan.
Mhm.
So that threat would obviously hopefully be neutralized with completion of it. And 12, again, since we have to rely on grants, going back to what Rachel said, that over competitiveness for said grants puts us at a disadvantage as well for certain things when it comes to whether infrastructure, housing, things like that nature.
Thank you, sir.
I picked climate change and water sustainability. This is like the biggest threat to all of us. And I don't know how much we've really put into really making sure that we're safe and that we're doing as much as we can to keep from the impacts. Number 5, lack of housing for external workforce recruitments. I hear all the time about businesses and doctors' offices. They can't bring new staff into town because they can't find a place to live. And then 11, unchecked growth. I think we need to figure out the balance of having people come here to retire and then how many people we need to help support those retirees. Nothing against retiring here. And you.
All right, thank you, Vicki. Okay.
For the threats, I
For the threats, I prioritized number one, climate change. We only have so much control over that. So and the city is already doing a lot. But we can continue to plan for maybe hybrid vehicles, solar panels on the city buildings, little things like that. I think they're very actively involved in the water sustainability, but we just need to keep it in the back of our mind for future planning. And I also chose number 4, adverse state legislation action, rent capping, because it seems like such an easy thing to do. I'm not sure why it didn't happen 2 years in a row. And number 5, lack of housing for external workforce recruitments. It's for so many people, they don't have a place to live. Because if you have to live outside the city limits, that's going to cost you more for gas to get to a minimum wage job. You have to pay so much here for daycare, if you can find a daycare. So it all is, it's kind of like a domino effect. Thank you.
Thank you.
My top threats that I think we need to focus on are, or keep working towards, would be number 1, climate change. Number 5, lack of housing for external workforce recruitments. And number 11, unchecked growth. Definitely have a similar mind to my fellow counselors on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 2, the aging population. It just impacts so many things, services and so on. Number 4, the adverse state, and I would say and federal legislation. And then number 9, the lack of non-service related employment gets to the focus on in economic development.
Thank you, sir.
So I wonder if I kind of looked at this one with a different lens of my priorities that we can actually do something about, even if it's just something little. So like we can't do a whole lot about climate change because it's happening so rapidly to begin with. And there's only so much we can do as our own little space on this giant rock that is Earth. And then aging population, we can't really do a whole lot about that. But
it's the alternative we worry about.
So I chose number 4, adverse state legislation action. It's just so frustrating when the obvious choice can help so many citizens and the option chosen benefits other people instead. And then I chose number 5, lack of housing for external workforce recruitments. That one's pretty self-explanatory. If we can't have people move here, we can start to crumble. And then I also chose number 17. And I know that other council members think differently than I do, but I am so infrastructure focused and believe on community issues need to be focused on by the community and not so much by the government part. But that's just me.
All right. Thank you for sharing your perspective.
Did you say number 17?
Yes, number 17.
I was looking for some humorous way to include gin in our threats in number 17.
I said not enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Good, good. Well, thank you. Marin's doing the speed typing, which will show the consensus item in each of the quadrants.
Some of the quadrants will have 4, as we had multiple of 2. So you'll get that.
Yes, but we're going to identify the 3 or actually, why don't we identify the actual number of votes for the ones that you list? When you have such an expansive list, it's very hard to compress them. And as you've already observed, there's some overlap here and there. And so not being a strict constructionist, I would say clearly you've got some that 5 of you voted for. So there is an uncanny similarity in what wavelength you're on in some of these areas. But 2 can be significant when you have so many elements to choose from. And I'll suggest how you might do a next step, recognizing the clear consensus item versus what I would say is you put them in, one of the facilitator terms is a parking lot item. The 2 sort of go on the side. If you satisfy something that had a higher rating, you want to elevate it, it's a pretty good way to transfer it over. But meanwhile, we're really going to focus on those items that had 3 or more votes, if you will.
So under strengths, we had 1 consensus item, which was very secure financially, item number 24. We did have 4 items that had 2 votes, which were number 12, collaborative partnerships, 15, strong city leadership, 19, competent city staff, and 20, overall positive quality of life. For weaknesses, the items that received consensus were 1, infrastructure needs to catch up with growth, 12, lack of affordable workforce housing, affordable housing and planning. And items that received 2 votes were 19, capital improvement projects seeking more federal funding, and 24, lack of funding for big city projects. For opportunities, we had 2 consensus items. Number 6, capitalizing on strengths. And number 13, comprehensive plan update. We also had 2 items with 2 votes, which are 14, transitioning from agricultural based to tech and tourism based economy, and 20, catching up with infrastructure. For threats, we had 4 consensus items, which were number 1, climate change, number 4, adverse state legislative action, number 5, lack of housing for external workforce recruitments, and number 11, unchecked growth.
And if you'd be kind enough to give us a couple minutes to coordinate for the next step, we'd appreciate it. Well, thanks once again for your diligent engagement in the process. Not surprisingly, where I've worked with other groups, it's almost a universal truth that that group determines 5 to 8 overarching items that they have strong consensus from. So you're exactly spot on in terms of group performance. The challenge then becomes is what do we do with this information? And I was mentioning in the break to Harmony that identifying these sorts of focal points are really direction setting for your staff. And as policymakers, we generally, as staff, lean on you to define the overarching goals, areas of specification, attention, concentration of resources. And that's the outcome of a strategic thinking exercise. It produces these. Now, there are a couple of ways to proceed from this juncture. One is to simply turn to you and say, what do you imagine you'd like to see as next steps in addressing the issues or capitalizing on the strengths or seizing the opportunities, those there. And so it's useful to have some of your initial thinking about it. You don't have to leave at the end of the day and say, we have a plan of action that's formulated. But over time, there will be a plan of action that's formulated to address the issues that you've identified here. So if you just sort of inhale, exhale, and then feel free to just sort of, and it's usually good, let me start. And I observed to Marin as she was typing out, anybody notice a strong connection between that financial strength and the need for infrastructure growth catch up? I mean, obviously that is something that you can capitalize on in addressing a series of the items that you've mentioned. Gee, I can hardly handle one, let alone two at the same time. So that's what I do. I just turn and say, when you think of addressing the weaknesses associated with infrastructure needs and catching up so that you can handle the growth that keeps coming your way, I understand there are perhaps 400 units in the development queue right now. So it appears as though the pace is not slacking for development.
But they're the wrong price houses.
Uh-huh. All right. So we'll come to that as you get to the housing one. Oh, wait a minute. Thank you. Somebody noticed my aging eyes and said, can you increase the font, please, Maren? That's what she's working.
I was going to say, it's really nice that it's one page. I wonder if you went to a full screen view and got rid of the toolbar up at the top of it, would help give you more real estate.
Oh, I see.
View and then full page or something. View.
Oh, you got it.
Thank
We'll
you.
just imagine its strength, it says up top there. Okay. So as you turn your attention to the first item in weaknesses, what might be your initial thoughts as a constructive next step?
I think we put that on there knowing that we're working on it. So I think kind of staying the course with the infrastructure building. A lot of it's been focused on like the city buildings, but I think also turning some of the focus and money towards the infrastructure we talked about within the city, like downtown, the ability for people to walk
Sidewalks, things like that.
places and yeah. So I think staying the course on what we're already doing citywide, but turning it up a little bit more on the outside stuff.
Okay. Kathy, you were going to say something?
I was going to say, I know the city does overviews probably yearly, like the condition of the parks and buildings and things like that. But to me, infrastructure means roads, and our traffic patterns are changing. You know, we have trucks taking shortcuts because they think it takes too long to get down the main street, when really they can only be on a residential street to pick up or drop off something. But it's, you know, things like that as far as infrastructure to me means roads.
Thank you. Other observations?
Re-engage, even though the days came out of session, it's only, 6-8 months before they go into full session with our lobbyists and state legislative representatives. So we can have a game plan going into the session.
Right. If you're going to pursue grants and the state is the giver of many grants, then it's nice to have a coordinated message to bring to them and one that can be reinforced over a number of months and not just after they ring the bell for the commencement of the legislative session.
Particularly because it's a full session as well.
Other notions about infrastructure moving forward?
Oh, it's just a name badge hitting the floor back here.
Boys and
So thinking about next steps with infrastructure, and this is probably all wrapped into it, but the types of spaces, zoning, that kind of thing. Those are, I'm not, sorry. Let me try to rephrase this. So as city councilors, something that we can control is where in our city said infrastructure needs to be improved on or changed or encouraged or incentivized or what have you. So, yes, reviewing zoning, I suppose, could be a place to go next. But that's just a suggestion. Are we already doing something like that?
I know several people are actively taking notes. Great. All right, what about item 2 under weaknesses? Lack of workforce housing, affordable housing, and planning. What might be constructive next steps?
I would re-echo lobbyists, going back to making sure our affairs in order for the state, what we're going to need from them to be addressed.
I want to support something I think Kathy said earlier about engaging the builders and where we could get them to start looking at building affordable housing as we've defined it.
Thank you. Harmony, and then Dan. Oh, Dan, and then Harmony.
Yeah, just picking up on that, how do we solicit from developers what would incentivize them to build, three $300,000 homes rather than one $900,000 home? Is there something that the city could do that would incentivize the private sector that way?
And just I just was reminded of a class that I took recently, offered through the MRSC, about looking at surplus lands, surplus city-owned lands, surplus property, and then how do we move through the process of documenting the history of that parcel, what is and this is just reminding me that I've been meaning to connect with the various folks on city staff that work in this realm. Hi. And that this could be that utilize going through that process, really looking at what we have in our backlog or our stock of available properties. If there's something that we could potentially look at and say, oh, maybe this could be something that we go through. And if it's not serving the city, then how do we move through the process of having this be set aside just for an affordable housing or workforce housing project of sorts? So thank you. Definitely put a question mark after that of like, is there surplus city property?
Well,
it was
one never knows.
It was an interesting webinar, and yeah,
Thank you.
just haven't had a chance to dive too deep into what that looks like applied in SQUIM.
Any other first thoughts on that matter, or should we move on?
Continue to engage with organizations like Habitat that provide those.
Mm-hmm. I think we're going to run out of whiteboard space here. Good, thank you. All right, so now as we ask you to cast your eyes on the opportunities list, so you obviously have enumerated a lot of strengths that you can bring to bear in addressing the issues here. And you've just mentioned something fairly much akin to collaborative partnerships with Habitat for Humanity or others. Is there something else that jumps out from you as how you might apply the opportunities list to addressing either the weaknesses or the threats?
The first step would be recognizing, you know what I mean? Like not a survey, but the city staff certainly know what their priorities are, more so than council does.
So there might be some constructive conversation betwixt council and staff, maybe at a work study session or something of that nature. It appears obvious, I think, that you've already seized the opportunity to engage a serious update of your comprehensive plan. Do you have particular expectations of what the outcome of that work would be? Not being able to cite a new clause for how you're going to deal with some development thing, but what is it that you really hope that comes out of that effort? So you can say there, success, we've made it.
One of the features that stood out to me in the presentation that we were given the video link to was the emphasis on community engagement through the process. And it feels like that's going to be really helpful on a number of different levels for us to come out of, a year, 18 months from now with a high level of confidence that those that are interested in participating have been given every opportunity to participate, and that we'll be well informed in our responsibility as stewards of the residents of the city.
Kathy?
People also need to realize I brought the present day comprehensive plan with me, and we have used it a couple of times on council. Some of that never happened. So people is to not be so idealistic and think that it is going to happen in 10 years because the city can only do what the city can do with funding. And I think our staff are wonderful, but they have other duties to do besides keep this in mind. And that's why I don't understand the unchecked growth. If we have good zoning, and we do, then how does unchecked growth happen?
That is fodder for another conversation with council sometime, but I would put that on the conversation list. Just what does that mean? I think very often we seize upon commonly used phrases and we have a different meaning, each one of us at the table, what it is. And in order to make stride forwards, investing some amount of effort in trying to find out what your common definition of the problem is. Very often we're faced with problems and we zoom to try and figure out what might be the remedy to do it, and don't spend enough time defining what the problem is. And our good intentions and resources oftentimes go amiss because we haven't figured out what the collective view of the situation is. And so I think that's a next step opportunity for not only that phrase, but others that might appear as you go through the comprehensive update. Vicki?
I think for the comprehensive plan date, I hope we can see a plan with a lot of intention to consider all of the people who live here and not focused on bringing new retirees. I mean, again, part of our infrastructure is that we don't have housing for people who provide services to the retirees. So really imagining, unchecked growth is really only having new housing developments that are over $500,000 a home, and where's the balance with the workforce housing and the affordable housing, and how can we build that into a plan?
Other observations? I might just add that the law requires your update every 10 years, but it doesn't keep you to only looking at it every 10 years. Communities, I think it important, this is just my editorial comment now, is to look at the pace of change and look at what trends are changing in the development world or the housing or the migration people in and out of community, and then decide for yourself if some sections need a refresh sooner than every 10 years. Just to keep things going. Just like strategic plans, most consultants will tell you they're virtually all stale by 5 years. People used to think, and we're thinking in the city business, when you think of when you do a capital improvement projection over the next 20 years, when you're updating your comprehensive plan. I mean, I've never found that polished crystal ball that says that you can come close to it. It's a statement of intention. It's a recognition of certain issues. But some communities aren't always in a strong financial position, and therefore those improvements simply aren't going to be occurring on schedule, and everything that's been attached to this notion that something's going to be online in 7 years, you're going to add a capacity for your sewer treatment or water production or whatever the case might be, throws everything else it can. So it's just bear in mind that meeting state minimums may not meet the vision that you have for your community. So might we look at, I think we're up to threats here. Climate change. Initial thinking about what, if any, other action this city might want to consider in order to build your resiliency on the face of what seems to be ever advancing climate change.
Well, beyond water, there's also that climate change is the biggest threat to all of our health in the near future. And we've already have issues with having enough medical providers in our community and staff for staffing. So all of that plays into how are we going to deal with climate change. So I see it as connected to housing, as connected to recruiting people from outside of the area to come here and work.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, emergency planning. So COVID was a really tough time for all of us, and climate change is going to play into that as well. So, you know, of those health emergencies, what have we built to make sure that we can sustain through those more emergencies like that?
Thank you.
I think going back to something that Harmony mentioned moving forward is to look at, just turn it on. It was on, yeah. Ways that the city can influence moving to more energy efficient appliances and things like that. So whether it's through the PUD, through the city itself, type of things.
Mm-hmm. So what you're identifying there is, and I usually encourage councils to think about when they're updating strategic planning in some particular way, is to think about what is completely in your control. What might you accomplish best through an effective partnership? And what are the things you can only hope to influence? For instance, you can go to the legislature and testify on a pending bill. You're not going to get a vote on it. And even if you bring 4 other cities with you, that might not carry the day. So there are some things completely within your span of control, those things that you can effectuate with an effective partnership, and those things you just have to sort of preach for a while to folks. Good, Kathy.
This may be along the same lines, but if our climate's going to get drier and hotter,
Mm-hmm.
then water rights is going to be a huge deal in the future. And the city, and they are already planning for that, but people need to pay attention to water rights and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we had forest fires either last summer or the summer before, not here, but it greatly affected our air quality.
Mm-hmm.
The visibility was poor. You could
Mhm.
smell it. It was hard to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have more of that in the future, that's going to affect health.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right. Your point on water rights, I don't know if it's a familiar theme to many of you. I was managing a community, and 3 days before I arrived there, the council had to declare a moratorium on all building because the state had come in and identified that there are already 700 connections over-connected. Their system could not support it. And obtaining water rights is the first chore that you're going to do if you want to cure a shortage. And it is something that doesn't operate on a predictable schedule. And so that's a very sensitive item for communities who are planning ahead and experiencing considerable growth in the near term and anticipate even more growth over time. That was my editorial comment number 2. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I resonate with what you just said. I also appreciate you bringing it up again, Brandon, about what tangible things can we do to encourage folks to choose more eco-conscious, water-conscious features in their home or actions that they can take right now for a more resilient future. And I welcome the exploration process because definitely want to do that, but in a financially responsible way.
Thank you.
I was going to change the tone here a bit. In previous exercises like this, you combine, it's almost an equation. If you take a threat sort of and add a strength or multiply by a strength, you can end up with an opportunity. And climate change globally, or at least hemispherically, is certainly a threat. But we also live in one of the most attractive places and resource-rich places in the hemisphere. So we potentially will be very attractive to climate refugees, if you will. And how do we turn that into an opportunity and look at it perhaps from that side of the coin?
Keen observation. Any other initial thoughts on threats? Yes.
If we're still talking about the climate change piece and what you just mentioned about climate refugees, maybe they come from places where they've already experienced all of these challenges of lack of or increasing scarcity of water, air quality concerns, and potentially the folks that are moving here, as we've mentioned before, could be tapped as community educators, folks that could come in and collaborate with the city and say, hey, I just moved here from California and here's all these cool things we were doing, or from the other side of the state. Like I've noticed the city of Spokane is doing a lot of really great public incentivization, to use the word that's on the whiteboard there, for choosing options that are more water resilient in terms of like landscaping, et cetera.
Thank you. Well, it sounds to me like you've got plenty to think about.
We're going to move on to number 2.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just asking because I think that up to this point we were focused on number 1 on the threats list.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering if
Sure.
Are we going to move to number 2, or
what would you like to add to the earlier conversations that you've had about the adverse state legislative action?
Really just echoing consensus with my fellow counselors that it was very frustrating to come out of that and be like, there it was, and it didn't pass again. So just just knowing that we have some pieces that we're going to keep those conversations at the top of our list.
Mm-hmm. The reality is the vast majority of legislation that is enacted is not done on the first go around. Yeah, sometimes it's years in the making, literally. Lack of housing.
Can I
sure.
add? I think the thing that was missing was we responded individually to requests for support, but we didn't do it as a city. And I'm wondering if, putting things forward more as our part of our legislative priorities, that housing, especially the rental bills, get bumped up. I don't think it got the same kind of attention as maybe funding for a park,
Mm-hmm.
and this really impacted a lot of people in our community.
Yeah. For editorial comment number 3 is, it's been my experience that there's power in numbers. The more communities that are petitioning their legislators for a particular outcome, the greater the likelihood that you'll get what you're asking for. And it just takes quite some time to build that collaborative approach to legislative action.
But it was one of our legislators who was who could have helped push the vote over. So I think it's important that it comes from our community.
We actually don't know why people vote no. You know, we're not privy to that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Number 3.
I think we covered that in some of the other things. So, you know, the updated comprehensive plan, working with partners, talking to the developers and trying to get more affordable workforce housing.
Before I was on council, this council enacted was it a resolution or an ordinance for the general facilities charges and the park and impact fee waivers for affordable housing. So we've already got that under our belt.
Mm-hmm.
We already have that tool in the toolkit, as it were. So I guess looking at what are other pieces to go with that, if needed or not. Just asking question.
And lastly, unchecked growth.
I'll just say what I said before. To me, that means growth that doesn't think about all of the people that live here. So if we're having growth that only supplies housing for high earners, that to me is unchecked growth. Is that?
That's really helpful to put that definition around it. Thank you. And I think a bit more about what you're saying, but that's takes me down a different road than what I was thinking before when somebody said unchecked growth. To Kathy's comment, is we seem to have pretty good zoning and building codes and so on. So,
yeah. Thank you. Well, that then is your first touch on the product of your work effort for today. And you can give that some consideration and decide how you might want to proceed. I mean, the options of many. You can ask for 1 or 2 of these items to be put on a future work session agenda and try and solicit opinions from the staff or the experts you have working for you as to what might be initial steps along the way, and give some sort of constructive guidance as the conversation develops. Or the council can spend as much time as they want amongst themselves at an open public meeting, just trying to further explore the dimensions and qualifying the definitions of terms, and to make certain that you're understanding about the same thing when you're talking about certain topics. And you need not answer that question today, but that would be the next step to consider, is how you want to move forward, and whether or not you want some sort of work plan developed associated with these items, and if so, when you might want to see something like that. And if you give initial thinking about what, if any, of those items you want to start contemplating making budgetary provisions for as you construct your next budget. All of those things are down the line, but the more forethought that you're able to provide, then the more likely you'll get to the destination you have in mind. Okay, with that, unless anyone else has a closing observation, I'd suggest that we take a break till about 5 after the hour, and then we'll talk about brainstorming what that might include and how that might unfold. Okay, thank you. While you were chatting, this thing behind me said that this meeting is now being recorded. So I wanted to point that out to you. No. And so this is the last scheduled item on your agenda. And let me explain, if you will, how these kind of brainstorming sessions typically play out with city councils and county commissioners and the like. And that it's intended to be a judgment-free zone where people can say, you know, I'm at home at night and at 10:30 at night, this idea strikes me and I don't know who to bounce it off of. I don't want to be held to it. It's an unripened notion. I'm just sort of thinking about the wide expanse of things that go on in my community and don't know if they're worthy of follow through, or maybe there's several other people who are thinking along similar lines, but until we voice them, nobody knows what's going on. So if you say something, nobody should say, that's what Kathy wants to do. It's just somebody exploring an idea without fear of being attached to an outcome that they haven't even imagined yet. So it is simply an opportunity to say, these are on my mental radar screen. And perhaps given the opportunity sometime, we might want to talk further about this notion or something else.
Quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it in regards to the SWOT analysis, or is it just open?
No, it is open
Okay.
season, open season. Thank you for my apologies. We have completed the SWOT analysis. And moving on to a completely different topic now, it's just free floating thoughts and expression. And we're generally public sector elected officials have so little time to do something like that. You're so busy meeting your personal commitments, your commitments to your community, and your meetings are agenda driven, and there isn't very much opportunity to just sort of exercise your broader thought process. And this is what the opportunity is intended to present to you this afternoon. So there's no particular order, no particular subject that's on or off the table. It's whatever's on your mind that you'd like to explore, or at least express to your colleagues that you've been thinking about it.
I guess I'll go ahead and start. Outdoor council meetings. Like in the summer. Yes, yes.
Wow, that's an interesting notion. Yeah. Yeah. Now, you know, obviously, two of you are relatively new to the council. You don't have necessarily the background and history that they do in community events and other sorts of things. You might have had varying motivations to run for office in the first place, and you just haven't had a chance to begin to talk about some of those things that might have concerned you, or some opportunity you were hoping to be able to pursue. And again, without your comment being taken as what's going to be on the agenda the next time you meet a city council, it's just an opportunity to explore that thinking.
Well, I want to take up something we talked about earlier, but just the conversation about engaging with our citizens better, and, you know, having opportunities in our agenda to really talk about things that are important to them and make sure that they're getting the right education on things, like why we don't just arrest homeless people and throw them in jail, you know, those kind of things. Harmony, I thought this would be your thing.
I have another.
Where's that verbal processing?
Thank you, Vicky, excuse me. Thank you. Well, just was looking at this one, and a lot of the pieces that have been heavy on my mind I've brought up today. So don't want to sound like a broken record or anything like that. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if I need to repeat them. They're already captured in our discussion earlier, and yeah, I look forward to seeing to exploring all of this content further with everybody. Thank you.
If this is oh, go Kathy. Yeah.
It's not going to be profound. Okay, what we don't do that some cities do is we don't have site visits. Like if there is an issue with an intersection, or if there's an issue with pedestrian safety in a neighborhood, or there's unintended consequences to something changing from commercial to residential, and have our meeting at the site, which means that the clerk would have to go with us and, take roll and record, but it can be done, and you can invite the citizens, and it can be done because of people's work schedules very early in the morning, in the evening before it gets dark. I mean, you don't want to become part of the safety issue by standing around in a group, but it's very effective, really, and it makes citizens think that they have input and that you're listening to their concerns. One time it was light pollution. This business was legally next to a residential neighborhood,
Sure.
and they ran shift work, and the lights run in the parking lot at night, and I didn't know that it went into the windows of the people that live nearby. Little things like that.
Mhm.
It's doable.
Site visits.
I guess somewhat along those lines. No judgment zone. It would be awesome if there could be city tours, because I think that is the single most impactful just like process I've been through in order to really fully grasp the context of the things that the city as an entity can and cannot do, and the things that they need to pay for. And so city tours were really educational.
Mhm.
I wonder what it would take to logistically, but as well as just in terms of planning, agenda planning, to meet with the school board in a joint meeting once or twice a year. So there's certain things on our agenda that we have to do. I'm sure they, the consent agenda and so on. I'm sure they've got similar things, so there'd have to be a time of separate role and so on. But then set a half a dozen items that are of joint concern that would be useful to the public to have us all in the same room at the same time.
Have the city councils of the North Olympic Peninsula ever done a joint meeting? Like
We did with the county commission.
Yeah, we do with the county commissioners.
just the
sometimes.
county commissioners?
I think
Yeah,
we did it with the
it's-
school board once.
Okay.
I think.
Is that a thing that like Forks, PA, Sequim, and PT? Would that be weird? Is that a thing? I'm sorry. Open brainstorming. So I'm going there.
Go.
Logistically wise, maybe, but yeah, we usually just set it up as a work session. We
Mhm.
could always do it longer if wanted to, but usually it's just before a regular meeting, meet with them.
Are all of the, this is another question, just tossing ideas out there. Are the other city councils across the North Olympic Peninsula also on the same timeline with us in terms of doing their comp plan?
Yes.
That's a yes. Maybe that could be the topic of concern, like a regional joint meeting about the comp plan.
Thank you. What other ideas are swimming around in the back of your minds?
I was having a wonderful chit chat the other day with Kathy, and this was true. It was her idea, but I think it's really cool. So I'm going to share it. Okay. On the path of having, so this summer, styrofoam is no longer going to be a thing for restaurants. They need to start pivoting away from it. There's the statewide ban. To kind of dovetail with that, what if the city of Sequim had, and again, maybe this isn't our role, but I'm just going to put it out there on the public record. Maybe it does play out that we could do that, or that someone else would think this was a good idea and pick up the baton and keep running with it. But what if there was an eco restaurant recognition or certification, some sort of little sticker people could put in their window and say, I'm a Sequim eco restaurant. And that means a variety of things. It could mean that they're composting their food leftovers, that they are, well, and I know that it's that it's a state requirement that they offer biodegradable or more eco-conscious items or packaging for to-go items. But there's other ways that restaurants could be conscious of their carbon footprint, and we could offer the checklist, and then if they meet certain criteria on the list, I mean, I'm not, just tossing ideas out there, see what sticks.
That's what this is about. Dan, I thought you were leaning towards your microphone, or did I misjudge the move?
No, thank you. Picking up on what Vicki commented on early on, the special purpose, like a work session for the public it's announced and for the public to attend, where we hear from subject matter experts on the unhoused, or we hear from subject matter experts on other issues of concern, to a certain extent, like we have with the groundswell of support for the manufactured home park. But that's not been our initiative. It's been, an organized public response to a pressing issue. So
No one knew that was going to happen.
what's that?
Nobody knew that the landlords would all of a sudden be raising all the land is leased. The manufactured homes are owned. Nobody knew that there would be a big land grab as housing prices went up. So.
Any other tantalizing thoughts to share?
Tantalizing is kind of high bar there.
How about mediocre? Again, this isn't a test, it's an opportunity.
So can I make maybe a plea? So since January, we have been working on the having proclamations for awareness months. And so I'm hoping that maybe some of you want to interact more with that. We've had January, February, March, and so we're looking at April. Got some working with you two on the autism, going to work with Y and Boys and Girls Club on child abuse awareness or child abuse prevention, but really, and looking at that list down the road, seeing who, because the point is to engage with different members or sectors of our community who we don't normally engage with, and bring them in and kind of support them. And, so if anybody else wants to participate in that, please let me know.
I think another thing is I personally think that, and I try to, as much as I'm able to, recognize those in the community that do good in the community with their personal achievements, community achievements. It's like I personally wrote letters of congratulations to the Royalty Corps for the irrigation festival type thing. So just keep an eye out those that are doing good in the community kind of thing.
Okay.
I have a question. I wonder if it's possible to, and I tried this at my job, my day job. I tried to use an AI. I used the Google Bard, and I created or was working with it and tried to get it to put together a calendar file, an ICS file of all of the events for that organization. And I was frustrated because it would give me the first two and the last one. And there were, I don't know, 22 events on the list.
Mhm.
And so it was like, well, thank you. That's really nice of you, you know, to give me a very clear, there's a very, I don't have the programming terminology right at the tip of my tongue, but it was very much like, here's the format, you know? And I think that was just because I was interacting with Google Bard, which is a free option, potentially to help keep our citizens informed of what's going on in their community or events that we are offering. Maybe we could create an ICS file using an AI to provide that all of the information in a comma separated. I don't need to give the specifics. There's subject matter experts on that. So, but yeah, I thought that was the Google Bard was working with me, but it wouldn't give me the full file.
Right out. So really, it's using AI to try and capture the realm of events going on in the community and publicize them.
Yeah, to help keep people informed. Barb made a comment to me during the break that that she has run into people who didn't know that the Sunshine Festival was happening. And it's like, oh, but we're putting it in the Gazette, we're putting banners across town, it's in social media, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I don't know, just, let's just keep using all of those and then toss in another piece in the mix. Have some ICS file to just go boop, and AI would make it really easy, potentially.
All righty. Thank you. So as the auctioneer would say, going once, going twice. I think we've concluded this part of the agenda then. Thank you so much. And the last item is typically whether or not any of the councils have closing comments on today's undertaking. If you do, then this is a grand time to be able to say your piece before we ask for adjournment.
Just a quick thank you to everybody that helped set up today. Thank you to Dave for putting in I know we're paying you, but still, thank you for putting in as much effort as you've put in to be prepared for herding this group and trying to get a consensus for everything. And thank you to our senior management team for being open and available. I'm sorry we didn't ask you any questions. I kind of feel bad now. But yeah, thank you for council for being so open-minded and honest and communicative. I really appreciate that. So thank you for everybody that's here.
Kathy.
I appreciate the city staff coming and staying and putting up with our shenanigans. I had a completely different idea about what this would be, but I do appreciate the administrative staff coming and staying and helping us. Thank you.
Probably it's unfair to Matt, but I would appreciate if there is a summary comment to the extent that you feel like you can speak on behalf of your staff of the value of a day like today for you and for staff, and sort of how it feeds intuition or feeds the teamwork, the collaboration we're trying to build between staff and council. That would be helpful. And while you're thinking about that,
This is going to give you a chance to think of and compose your thoughts as harmony helps us. Oh, thank you. Well, your thought process is
done.
over.
Well, maybe that would be more fair. This is impromptu now, but
That's all right.
to that, in that same vein, as those of you that have experienced these before, is there any kind of a meeting evaluation, that's something we can look at over the next 24 to 48 hours that would give feedback to us as a team and to the facilitator and to staff on what went well, what we wished, our expectations were that either weren't met or just didn't, just the general idea of a meeting evaluation. So that's the open question, giving Matt a few minutes to think about my other question.
So I don't know, Dave, if you have a post evaluation, survey or something. If not, we do almost all of our events. We usually do a survey afterwards to try to process and improve it for the next one. So if you've got a standard one, we're happy to use yours. Otherwise, our HR is really good at doing post-event survey. So. So tomorrow morning is, as you know, we always meet Tuesday morning in there as a senior management team. And so certainly this will be top of the agenda, like how to go. And so I'll get more input. My thoughts are really appreciate you all coming together. Love the collaboration and the cooperativeness of it all, the clarity. I think Dave has presented a methodology that allows some priorities and a lot of discussion and civility and priorities. So I think it's helpful. We clearly will need to continue to work with you on details of what does that mean now and what are the expectations. And I've been having a few side notes, as you probably noticed, with Dave to say, so what next? And so he's been saying, I think it means this. So we'll continue to try to make sure that this translates into whatever you want it to be. And I'm always reminded by my staff, more detail and direction is better than not. So, certainly relative to staff's expectations, but those will be set as we hear more about your priorities, and not only just priorities, but your assumed or presumed action steps going forward. So, no, I appreciate. I think Dave said he wouldn't do this without us, and we didn't really want to have any input other than to just listen. So I appreciate us just being able to watch you all operate as a team, and we'll all be able to form our own inputs from your comments and stuff. So I think that's been, even though we've been quiet and even though you haven't asked for input, I think it's been very useful for us to be a part of this event. So I think that's probably, without turning it over to my senior manager, I think that's probably my overview. Thank you
for being responsive. Impromptu.
Yeah, just from my own perspective, I would say that the critical foundation upon which a collaborative relationship can be built between a policy board and its administrative arm is based upon the depth of understanding that you have for each other and their perspectives and their responsibilities in this overall organization. And sitting for a day and listening to the leadership of your community describe what they think is important, what's worrisome, what kind of vision they have for the community is generally some of the best spent time for a senior management team, because it opens up a window not only to what your beliefs and thoughts are, but your thought process. And it's much, much easier to serve the interest of a governing board if you have an understanding of how they think about things.
Being that this was my first council retreat, I didn't know what to expect, but I've been very satisfied with my experience, I would say. It's always great to get to know all of you better and build that relationship. And next time, I think it'd be, I'm sure that this has been very helpful to have it like this, but I also feel funny sitting with my back to the staff, because a lot of my comments have been something that I feel like is a collaborative discussion. So, yeah, I hope that y'all have, that this has been valuable time. It's been very valuable for me. And so I hope also for them. I appreciated connecting with folks during the little breaks and being like, oh, yeah, it definitely informs the discussion.
And I'll just add that this was very different from our last retreat. And I really appreciated the consensus building, the way we did things. And so thank you for bringing that to us. And it kind of coordinates with, with our evaluation of the city manager too. So it's nice to have the same process for different things. Thank you. And thank you, Maren. You did a great job.
Well, if that's it, that is the end of the agenda as I anticipated.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're most welcome. Oh,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I assume I think it went unanimous, didn't it?